It is the agenda for the 21st century you're living in today. For a brave new world where everything that you cherished and held true will no longer exist.
The North Pole is pretty dang hot. A weather buoy about 90 miles from Santa's headquarters recorded temperatures near 32 degrees Fahrenheit, the freezing point of fresh water. To put that in perspective, normal temps in the Arctic region this time of year hover around negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and they were already higher than normal. Temperatures reached negative 11 degrees on Tuesday, but in a span of 2 days jumped more than 40 degrees. One expert said that might have contributed to a major loss of sea ice. While the jump wasn't totally unexpected, it is cause for concern. This is the second time in the past 5 weeks the North Pole has experienced an unsettling increase. Experts fear if nothing is done to slow climate change, these kinds of warming events could happen far more frequently.
So, Professor Shapiro, if we take a look back at history, many industrialized countries experienced similar pollutions like China is experiencing right now. So would you say it's kind of an inevitable phase in a country's development?
I actually don't feel that it's inevitable now, given that we have very advanced technologies that would allow China to leapfrog and really show us a different sort of industrialization path. I think that one of the reasons that the United States has been able to clean up is that in essence we have exported our pollution to China. So you Chinese people are bearing the cost.
There has been a spike in food prices in Uganda due to a biting drought which has hit many areas in the East African nation. The crisis is expected to reduce production and economic growth. Uganda's central bank has cut its lending rate to 12% from 13% in an attempt to revive the already struggling economy. Experts have attributed the slow economic growth to poor food supplies as a result of the climate change.
I don't know if you guys can see this, but this is really strange. You see, up in the right-hand corner, you see our sun hiding behind all those clouds. But then look in the background, back there. What is that light back there? Where is that light coming from if the sun is right there?
Until recently, there was no medicine to prevent Ebola. More than 20,000 people have been infected by the virus since 2014 in Guinea, Sierra Leone and Liberia. 11,000 people who became violently ill didn't survive. Their families and anyone coming into contact with them were also threatened. Ebola spreads easily among people. But some lives were saved with a new experimental vaccine which was rushed into production when the outbreak became severe. 11,000 people in Guinea started a trial of an experimental vaccine last year. The program was led by the Guinean government, the World Health Organization, and international partners. Around half of the trial patients received the vaccine, and none of them caught Ebola within a 10-day incubation period.
New outbreaks of major infectious diseases have dominated the headlines in recent years, and for good reason.
If you just look at, let's say, from 2013, which is only 3 years from 13 to 16, we've had chikungunya in the Caribbean, we've had Ebola in West Africa, and now we have Zika in the Americas. We've seen emerging infectious diseases forever. We have them now, we always will have them. But to have a cluster like that is a bit unusual.
In the last decade and a half, the world has coped with SARS, H1N1 influenza or swine flu, Middle East respiratory syndrome, chikungunya, Ebola, and now Zika. Public health researchers say it's a certainty there'll be another.
As much as we were unprepared that Ebola was going to explode as it did, that Zika was going to come along so suddenly, presumably the next pathogen could well be something that we haven't anticipated.
So how can we be better prepared? It's a question global health authorities have been asking since Ebola erupted in West Africa, ultimately killing more than 11,000 people.
We coordinated a lot during the Ebola epidemic, and we had a joint experience of really the tragedy that occurred in West Africa and our frustration that we couldn't do more to intervene.
At the same time, pharmaceutical companies, governments, and nonprofits were working together to produce experimental vaccines and therapeutics at a faster pace than ever before.
Russian President Vladimir Putin praised U.S. President-elect Donald Trump on Friday, saying he has a finger on the pulse of U.S. society. Putin also launched a scathing attack on Democrats, saying they forgot the meaning of their own name and were sore losers. Speaking at his annual news conference in Moscow, Russia's president said that only his country had believed that Trump could win the presidency, but that did not mean Democrats could blame him for their defeat. He added that Obama's administration and his party want to blame their failures on external sources. He said, quote, "Outstanding figures in American history from the ranks of the Democratic Party would likely be turning in their graves. Roosevelt certainly would be."
Fake news has become a plague on the web, and especially on social networks like Facebook. There are so many unreliable sources about this election, so we need a new rule for the web. Triple check before you share.
So this is the guy who told us that there were hundreds of swastikas being painted on buildings after Trump got elected. This is the guy who spent a year flacking for Hillary Clinton. I was convinced he wanted to be her press secretary. How does he get, and that's fine, he's got a political point of view, he's a progressive, he's an activist. How does he get to pose as a media critic on a purportedly nonpartisan news station?
Yeah, let me give you that quote first, Tucker, because I found it remarkable. He said about Trump supporters 6 days after Trump was elected, "We are seeing hundreds of swastikas, hundreds. Racist language, harassment, or in some cases, assault or bullying across the country." Now, this has been disproven completely. No one can verify anything around hundreds of swastikas or hundreds of people getting beaten around the country. Did Brian Stelter apologize? No. Did he retract? Was there any accountability from management? No. You have inmates running the asylum, and that's the problem here. So, you know, I say a New Year's resolution, Tucker. Basically, journalists that purport to be straight news reporters, like you had Kurt Eichenwald on last week, you proved him to be an advocate. Brian Stelter should do the same thing, change the name of his show on Sundays from Reliable Sources to Countdown with Brian Stelter and say our mission is to call out conservative media bias while taking on Trump at every turn, and people will respect the fact that he is being transparent.
That's exactly right. It wouldn't bother me. It's like NPR. If they would just stop pretending to be unbiased, I'd probably listen to it, because at least it's honest. Last quick question. CNN has not responded. I mean, this seems like the irony of a guy who decries fake news, disseminating fake news, but have they retracted his tweet? Have they apologized for it? Have they corrected the record at all?
You can go on Twitter right now to Brian Stelter's account, and you will see that tweet is still up, doing damage. People are still retweeting it out, and Stelter is standing by it, saying that he was only trying to point out the virality, how viral it was going. But again, he didn't provide any context around that tweet, and that does damage to Delta Airlines, and that's why fake news in this context is dangerous. It hurts American business, Tucker.
Under the National Security Entry-Exit Registration System, or NSEERS for brevity, men over the age of 16 from 25 countries, all of which were predominantly Muslim or Arab,
with the exception of North Korea, just to complete that axis of evil, were required to report to immigration authorities in person on a regular basis. They were also only able to travel through specifically limited airports, seaports, or land borders, and had to check in with immigration when coming or going. The program was overseen by the Department of Homeland Security and officially disbanded by Obama in 2011. However, its basic framework remained intact until today, when DHS announced it was immediately dismantling the program, saying its regulatory structure no longer provides a discernible public benefit, as the program has been rendered obsolete. Well, why was it so obsolete? As New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman noted in a letter to Obama this week, calling him to scrap the system, despite registering over 80,000 teenage boys and men, it never resulted in a single terrorism-related conviction.
A huge policy shift tonight for the U.S. regarding Israel. President Obama choosing not to veto a United Nations Security Council resolution condemning Israeli settlements in Palestinian-claimed territory, then demanding they stop. The U.S. has in the past almost always vetoed such measures, but not this time.
This vote for us was not straightforward because of where it is taking place at the United Nations. For the simple truth is that for as long as Israel has been a member of this institution, Israel has been treated differently from other nations at the United Nations. And not only in decades past, such as the infamous resolution that the General Assembly adopted in 1975 with the support of the majority of member states, officially determining that Zionism is a form of racism, but also in 2016, this year. One need only look at the 18 resolutions against Israel adopted during the UN General Assembly in September, or the 12 Israel-specific resolutions adopted this year in the Human Rights Council, more than those focused on Syria, North Korea, Iran, and South Sudan put together, to see that in 2016, Israel continues to be treated differently from other member states.
Tonight, a dispute over peace, politics, and the role of the U.S. presidency may be coming to a head at the United Nations. Just hours before the Security Council was set to vote for a resolution calling for Israel to stop building settlements, the ballot was abruptly cut off, averting a potential clash between the current and future U.S. presidents over U.S. relations with Israel.
We'll just have to wait and see what the results of those consultations are to see if the text moves forward.
The resolution demands Israel, quote, immediately and completely cease all settlement activities, calling it a flagrant violation under international law. CNN has learned that President Obama was prepared to let the resolution pass, either by abstaining or voting in favor of it. The U.S. has traditionally seen Jewish settlements in areas controlled by Palestinians as an obstacle to a peace process, but has never gone so far in a UN vote. The move today would have been seen by many as a provocation, a parting shot at Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, with whom President Obama has strained ties. Around 3 a.m., Netanyahu took to Twitter, writing in English and appealing for a U.S. veto. But before the White House could announce its support for the resolution, this morning President-elect Donald Trump sent out this statement calling for a veto and saying peace between Israel and Palestinians needs to be negotiated, not, quote, through the imposition of terms by the United Nations. A senior Israeli official tells CNN the Israeli government reached out to Trump to weigh in after failing to persuade Washington to cancel the vote. Today, gratitude from Israeli Ambassador Ron Dermer, who tweeted Israel, quote, deeply appreciates the clear and unequivocal call by Trump.
The United Nations is not a friend of democracy.
Trump's statement appeared to again signal his desire to shift U.S.-Israel relations. During the election, he said he would move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, and he denounced UN involvement in the peace process in an interview with Wolf Blitzer.
This has to be a deal between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
Trump says he wants to be seen as an honest broker in the Mideast.
I would love to be neutral if it's possible. It's probably not possible because there's so much hatred. There's so much going on.
The Erskine fire started on June 23rd in the area of Cooks Peak on Range Road in the Kern River Valley, and it quickly turned deadly.
The Erskine fire
One of the most devastating fires in California's history, and definitely the most devastating fire in Kern County's history.
Fire officials say an exhaustive 6-month investigation reveals the cause was a private power line on private property that was in a tree.
Over time, the insulation was wore down as the line rubbed on the tree, and a catastrophic electrical arc occurred that afternoon, and hot molten material dropped into the grass, the vegetation, and the fire was started by that electrical line.
Marshall said the power line ran from one building to another. I asked the chief if the line had been properly installed.
This is not a major power line such as from Southern Cal Edison or PG&E. This is a private power line that's past the meter.
Other unanswered questions: was the line up to code? Was it permitted? And will any criminal charges be filed against anyone? The investigation now goes to the Bureau of Land Management.
It'll probably be several weeks to a month before we make a determination on what direction we go as far as going after damages caused by the fire.
A Facebook video shows a white officer wrestling a black woman to the ground. He arrested her and 2 of her children. Last night, dozens of protesters demanded justice outside the county courthouse in Fort Worth.
We move now to breaking news coming in tonight of a new Christmas terror plot just thwarted. Authorities say multiple arrests in Melbourne, Australia, and it comes after the Christmas market terror in Berlin. And for the first time right here tonight, we're seeing video showing the moment the truck barreled into that market, killing 11 people. We've now learned 2 Americans are among the injured. A global manhunt for the suspect, a 24-year-old, and authorities today revealing his fingerprints were found in the cab of the truck.
Australian police say they've foiled plans for several bombings in the city of Melbourne on Christmas Day. 6 men and a woman, all in their 20s, were arrested in overnight raids across Melbourne.
We immediately informed the German authorities, both at the political level and through the police. Allow me to express my total satisfaction. We consider these 2 young men as extraordinary people, very young, who by simply performing their duty have done an extraordinary service to the community.
But the fact is, this is becoming almost like a social norm. People see it almost every day on the news. There's been a terror attack somewhere, and my worry is that people in America are being desensitized because it's not happening to us yet.
And the FBI and Homeland Security Department are warning law enforcement officials about new ISIS threats in the U.S.
This is in light of a posting that was made on some pro-ISIS websites in the last couple of days, calling on supporters to attack churches and holiday gatherings in the United States. And it included a list of U.S. churches around the country. And so this is a warning that the FBI has now issued. And it says, it reads in part, that ISIS sympathizers continue aspirational calls for attacks on holiday gatherings, including targeting churches. Now, we've seen, Jim, in the past, ISIS has called on its supporters to attack military targets, to attack law enforcement. What we're seeing lately is more of the type of thing that we've seen this past week in Berlin.
Wide terror fears this morning amid a new ISIS kill list, including turning U.S. churches into a bloody horror movie. The terror group releasing a list with names and addresses of thousands of churches in the U.S., Canada, France, and the Netherlands. The cold-blooded terrorists encouraging sleeper cells and lone wolves to make this holiday season a bloody one.
Aleppo's residents took to the streets on Thursday night to celebrate the city's liberation. Thousands braved winter weather to go out and shout chants in support of President Bashar al-Assad. Jubilant drivers were also blowing their cars' horns. Many hope the city can be rebuilt as soon as possible so normal life can resume.
بيان صادر عن القيادة العامة
The victory marks the beginning of a new period in fighting terrorism and ending it in all Syrian territories. Syrian leadership of the army and armed forces ensures that this victory will be a motivation for continuing the fight against terrorism and returning safety and security to the entire nation.
In the freezing winter, infernos rage. These are the oil wells ablaze near the Iraqi city of Gayara. They were set alight by ISIL as the group retreated from this oil-rich region ahead of the advancing Iraqi army. It's a financial, environmental, and health catastrophe.
The aim of the team is to collect, consolidate, preserve, and analyse evidence and turn its findings into prosecutions. The draft resolution, prepared by Liechtenstein and co-sponsored by 58 countries and regional powers, including Turkey, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, received 105 votes in favour, 15 against and 52 abstentions. Liechtenstein's ambassador, Christian Venevesa, said war crimes had gone unchecked too often and for too long. Venevesa also said that the UN's inaction signalled that war crimes and crimes against humanity are condoned and have no consequences. However, Syria and Russia voiced their criticism of the proposal, saying the General Assembly was encroaching on the territory of the Security Council, the UN body responsible for peace and security. Syria's ambassador for the UN, Bashar Jafari, said the resolution was a flagrant interference. The newly created investigative team will work alongside the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Syria. That was established by the UN Human Rights Council, which is looking at what the Council calls rampant war crimes in Syria. Although the investigation team cannot bring prosecutions themselves against individuals or governments, it can make recommendations to bodies like the UN's International Criminal Court. Liechtenstein had brought the motion to the General Assembly as none of the 193 nations hold the power to veto, unlike within the Security Council. The backers of the resolution therefore hope the team will finally pave the way to accountability after more than 5.5 years of conflict in Syria.
We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate, only the unloved hate, the unloved and the unnatural. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite.
In a time of domestic crisis, men of goodwill and generosity should be able to unite regardless of party or politics.